All right, welcome back for the last stream on Bhagavatam this week. We're going to talk about seeing the universe as a body, as somebody's body, just like you got a body with hands and eyes and all that stuff. The Bhagavatam is going to describe the universe as a body, as like God's body or a divine body or a body of the prototype being. So what we have here is after the Bhagavatam explains the evolution of the elements that are involved in building reality, it then remember it said that it still is not capable of creating a structure which could facilitate consciousness. In other words, it's not capable of hosting life. Matter is not at this stage capable of hosting life fully. It's just that the only interaction now between life or consciousness and matter is that consciousness is acting on matter and causing it to evolve. But it can't really go and sit and exist inside matter yet. Now, in order to get the structure that could host life, there needs to be a prototype. So there's a prototype living being, and that's called Purusha. There's other names for this prototype being, but here it's going to be called Purusha. Now, I probably should have titled this maybe the Purusha Sukta. The Purusha Sukta is a section in Rig Veda which describes this very thing, this very topic, how the universe is a body for divinity, for consciousness, and therefore for God. So in this part of the Bhagavatam, Brahma expresses exactly what's in the Purusha Sukta and therefore clarifies it. Because if you express the same thing with slightly different words, it gets more clear. So if you're a Vedic person, or even just of Indian or Hindu background, you'll be pretty excited because Purusha Sukta is a big deal in Indian culture and in Vedic culture. So here will be some kind of a explanation of that. All right, so Narada wanted to know how the three fundamental powers are related to the universal form of Purusha. How are these powers of Dravya Shakti and Jnana Shakti and Kriya Shakti, how are they related to Purusha? Because Brahma explained that the elements that were created, that were evolved from these powers, they don't combine into complex structures until they are made to do so by consciousness and the Purusha. So Narada is asking to explain this Purusha. Brahma is explaining that the Purusha is a prototype for the life forms that are going to be created in the universe. And he says this form is the essence of all the other forms. So it's like there's a form at the beginning of the universe which contains within it, maybe we would say the DNA codes or whatever, to use modern terms, the DNA code or the blueprint or the seed of all other life forms that will ever exist in the universe. And that's this thing called Purusha. Everything attains its unique nature as a result of the uniqueness of the various features of this universal form. It'll be called a universal form in English often because it means the universe as a form, the universe as a body. When you hear the word form translated into English, it often means body, like somebody's form. It's rupa in Sanskrit, which tends to mean the shape of something, which tends to mean the person's beauty or their body. So when you hear the English term universal form, it means the universe as a body for somebody, just like this body is a body for some soul, for some consciousness. The universe itself is a body for some consciousness. Okay, so this whole section, as I mentioned, is parallel to Purusha Sukta from Rig Veda. Rig Veda 10th mandala, 90th mantra, or 90th chapter. So here, let me get my glasses on. This text is small. Brahman gives a more elaborate description of what's summarized in Purusha Sukta in the line beginning with Sahasra Shirsha and the 3 verses starting with Brahmanisya Mukhamasit. So the universe, okay. Now he says the divinity of communication and the objects of speech, like words and languages, come from his mouth. So remember, he said that the Jnana Shakti develops these divinities that control these powers to interact with reality. And there was one called Vani, which was the power to interact with speech, to make speech, to make communication. What Brahma is saying is that these powers get assembled together into a being by the Purusha. So the power of Vani resides within, comes from, or resides in, or finds its base, finds its foundation, finds its place in the mouth of the Purusha. So this basically in all the life forms that exist, they make some kind of communicative noises with their mouth or something near their mouth or like a mouth. Because remember, the Purusha is the basic prototype for all the life forms that are going to exist. The 7 poetic hymns come from the 7 layers of his body. So there's 7 layers of body. There are plasma, blood, muscle, fat, bone marrow, and reproductive fluids. And the 7 kinds of poetic hymns. So in other words, it's the 7 refinements on speech. There's speech where it's situated in his mouth, and then the 7 essences of him are the 7 layers of his body are the 7 degrees of sophistication in speech. Think of it that way. Marcillo is asking if this is Narayana. Narayana is a blanket term that can include the Purusha, but because the Purusha is Narayan's expansion. Narayan extending is into this set of reality is the Purusha. So the Purusha is not Narayana, but Narayana is more than the Purusha. Narayana also exists beyond this whole set of reality. The flavors of all delicious and nourishing foods, like the feasts offered to the gods and ancestors, come from his tongue. So all of the water element with its flavor of taste, the ability to taste things, and all that stuff, all of those basic elements now found a configuration. Remember, they need to be configured so that they can assemble some kind of structure. So they find a configuration by becoming the tongue of the Purusha. So that's why all the living creatures that develop in the universe, they have some kind of tasting device in there, like a tongue in the mouth. So the mouth is also speaking, and then the tongue is tasting. The divinity of breath and the air come from his nose. Delightful perfumes, medicinal herbs, and olfactory divinity come from his sense of smell. It's interesting that herbs come from the sense of smell because they grow from the earth. The divinity of breath and air come from his nose. So basically, you see what's happening is all these disassembled building blocks of reality come to have some concrete structure by assembling in this prototype life form. The resplendent sun and the beautiful visual forms it illuminates come from his eyes. The dimensions of space and the knowledge-carrying sounds heard thereby come from his ears. So I'm saying come from, but you can think of it actually as quite as the opposite. They assemble in, or they find their place in. The moving air and the sense of touch, as well as the sacrifices to attain such pleasures, come from his skin. This is also interesting. Foliage, especially the trees needed for such sacrifices, come from the hairs on his body. The clouds come from the hair on his head and face. The hard ore stones come from his strong nails, and lightning comes from their brilliant polish. People who protect others come from his arms. Things that grant safety and security and aid in accomplishing goals come from his feet. The actions and movement in the world come from his footsteps. Fertility, semen, fluid, and rain come from his penis. The pleasure of sex comes from his genitals. The gods of death and of the departed come from his anus, which evacuates and frees the universe from the vile things in its bowels, violence, falsehood, death, torment, and so on. Frustration and immorality and all sorts of darkness come from his back. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of interesting stuff. I think it's particularly interesting that you get the full universe. It's not just the rainbows and the butterflies that come from the Purusha, but also you get stool and urine, right? So there's a bowel in the Purusha, which is the place where you collect unwanted things, right? In your body, you collect unwanted waste product, unwanted side effects in your bowel, and then you get rid of them through your anus. So Purusha has an anus and a bowel. The Purusha has a penis. Wow. Amazing. God is a penis. And it's the source of all the fertility, and all the sexual pleasure in the world is from this area. God's genitals, the universal genitals. They're the prototype of all the sexual pleasure in the world. So you see, you might think, what purpose does making poop serve? But it serves a use purpose, and if you don't do it, your whole body becomes toxic. You go into toxic shock, right? So your body needs a way. This is Saturn, like literally. This is why Saturn serves an important purpose: is to get rid of junk. And if you're like all lovey-dovey with your junk and you don't want to get rid of it, well, that's not going to be very good for you. That's why Saturn is the way Saturn is. So the universal life form has a way to evacuate waste products, and the waste products in the universal form are violence, lies, death, torment, hurting things. Yeah, violence, the stuff that hurts other things, is the bad side effect in the universe. The universal form collects it in its bowel and gets rid of it through the butt. Rivers and streams come from his veins. Mountains come from his bones. The ocean and all nourishment come from his belly. The place all living beings go in the world is destroyed is his belly. So this is an allusion to the fact that this is Narayan. The mind comes from his heart. Consciousness, intelligence, morality come from the soul of that Supreme Person. Now, the soul there means his identity. I thought I had more footnotes. Abhishek says this seems to be a very anthropomorphic view of the Purusha. I think it's only as anthropomorphic as your imagination. So first of all, anthropomorphic means changing something into the shape of a human. Anthro means human, and pomorphic means to change into. So one thing there is you have an assumption that this is anthropomorphic and not vice versa. Second thing is just you're imagining this to be a human. Although you don't like to think about it, dogs also have a penis and a butt, and turtles also have genitals and stuff, right? It's not necessarily humans. This life form is the life form that contains the blueprint for all the other life forms that will exist in the universe. So it's got physical structures that all life forms have or can have. No life form can exist in the universe that has something that this universal form doesn't have. Physical things and also mental and emotional things. things like frustration and the things that the mind experiences are also in there in the universal form. Right? There's things in the bowels, there's things from the back, there's pleasures and joys. Brahma concluded by saying, me, you, Shiva, the 7 firstborn sages, the divinities of light, the divinities of darkness, dragons, the paranormals, humanity, birds, beasts, reptiles, serpents, fauna, and flora. Everything, this is like, it seems like Brahma foresaw your question about anthropomorphism. The wings or fins are just hands, the locomotions. There's no mention of having 5 toes either, right? Hands, feet. So what Brahma's saying, me, so he's going to name he's going to touch on every category of life form now, going from the top down to the bottom. Me, you, Shiva, the 7 firstborn sages, the divinities of light, the divinities of darkness, the suras, the asuras, the dragons, nagas, the paranormals. Paranormals are Gandharvas, Siddhas, Charnas, Apsara, Yaksha, Raksha, and the Bhutas and the Pitri. Humanity, the birds, the beasts, the reptiles, the serpents, the fauna and the flora, everything that exists in the water, on the land, or in the sky, everything that exists, existed, or will exist, everything is that supreme person. He encompasses everything in the world, yet his origin is beyond it all. Thanks. So here, Brahma is explaining the Purusha Sukta, or paralleling the Purusha Sukta line where it says, Purusha Evedam Sarvam. Right? In the Purusha Sukta, it says, this Purusha is Sarvam. Purusha Evedam Sarvam. This being, this Purusha, is definitely all Purushas, all beings. So, in other words, Brahma is explaining what that means. This is the prototype. This is the blueprint for how every other life form can be derived from this one. And that's interesting also in how that contrasts with modern concept of evolution, which is that evolution kind of proceeds, although having no intelligence, also having no concept of where it's going, and then by chance it just moves somehow forward. But the Vedic concept of evolution is that the fundamental building blocks evolve and then they assemble. Consciousness is driving it. So the evolution is being guided by intellect or will or desire. So first it forms into the ideal form from which every other thing that you could want can be derived. Then nature is going to produce those forms from that potential in some kind of a sequential order. So this is really the difference between Bhagavatam evolution and evolution that I think probably is still taught in high school, which is the only real irreconcilable difference is that the modern concept of evolution doesn't say what's driving it. Doesn't say why it's happening. It's just actually there's either no reason or we're not even going to talk about that. We're not going to discuss the reason why it's happening. Why would things change? Why do things move forward at all? Whereas the Vedic concept of evolution is saying it's because the basis for everything is consciousness, which has desire. So it's trying to assemble things into the forms that it desires. And also, there's another Purusha Sukta line, which is Sa Bhumin Sarvata Sprishtva Atyaishtad Dashangulam. Wow. He pervades everything in the world, but he's 10 inches past it, literally. So in other words, by seeing the world, you can just about comprehend who he is. But he's actually 10 inches, like a little bit, he's just a little bit beyond this form that's in the world. So that's what I was trying to say before to you, Marcelo, is that this Purusha is Narayana, but actually this is like a projection of Narayana. This is how Narayana helps the living entities achieve what they want. By manifesting this form which has the potential to fulfill all their needs and desires. They can draw from this form to create different forms that will fulfill all of their desires. But actually, he's a little bit beyond that as well. And I think it's kind of cool that they say it's Dashangula. He's like a little bit. He's like 10 inches past. Okay, now Narada says, and actually he wants to take off on this topic of what do you mean like 10 inches past? So Narada says, that's amazing. The entity who is the prototype of the universe itself has his roots beyond the universe. Because remember what Brahma said at the end was he encompasses everything in this world. So everything in this world is some derivation of him. But his origin is beyond the world. That's what they're talking about with subhuman. Okay, this is a good question from Bardo. We didn't hear anything about a vagina. But you did, actually. Although maybe I didn't express it well in English. Because when it talks about the abdomen, the word is also for womb. So this is an entity which has both male and female parts. Because both the male and the female is going to be made from this one. But we refer to him as him, I don't know why, out of convention. I think in Sanskrit also they got it as a him, not as a neuter. So now Narada says, this is amazing. The entity who is the prototype of the universe itself has his roots beyond the universe. This might seem a little difficult to understand. So can you please explain it with an analogy, illustrate it? How can something which is the blueprint for this universe be beyond the universe? Can you give me an example for that? How can something which everything is derived from be beyond everything? Hello, my friend in Georgetown, Texas. Melissa says, do we get Bhagavatam in this Kali Yuga so we can surrender with intelligence? I guess so. The real reason you get Bhagavatam in Kali Yuga is because this is the only way that you can access the deepest meanings of the Veda. All right, so now Brahma is going to give an example of something which is, he's going to give an illustration to explain something that could be the root of everything yet beyond something. So he says, take life air, for example. Take prana, for example. Take air. Air energizes your body. But its energy doesn't originate in the body. It originates in itself. So he's saying the relationship between Narayan and this Purusha, or the relationship between Narayan or Purusha and the universe, is just like the relationship between prana and your body. Your body is energized by prana. That's why it's alive and vital. That's why it feels good sometimes. As long as it's not illness, then you feel great. But that energy that's energizing your body is coming from the oxygen that you're breathing. Right? So it's the oxygen. Think of it this way. It's the oxygen in your blood that's making your whole body be alive. But the oxygen is from the air that you breathe in outside. So the same way, God is the oxygen that's in the body and the blood of this universe. But that oxygen is also beyond the universe, just like the air comes from outside your body. So this is the thing. When people do pantheism, remember Bhagavatam's version is panentheism, but you might be more familiar with pantheism, and there's a bit of a difference. Pantheism is like God is everything in this world. It's the trees, it's the grass, it's the bench, it's everything. And that's it. That's what God is. Panentheism is God is everything in this world, the trees, the grass, and the bench, and something else. It's something more, just like the oxygen is outside of your body and it comes in and permeates your whole body. Brahma says, he gives another example. Another example is the sun. It lends its radiance to all celestial things like the moon, but shines by its own power. In the same way, the Supreme Person is situated within his own power, independent of all things, but lends his power to all things. Thus, he's both within and beyond everything. So just another example, how can something be the power within something yet not be a part of that thing? I mean, right now I got this light shining on me, right? So the electricity is going through this light, but the electricity comes from outside the light. It's that simple. So you have the sun, the moon. The moon is shining because of the sunlight, and the sky and everything, and all the any mirror or any light that you have right now on the ground, it's shining because of the sun. But that doesn't mean that the sun is not beyond all those things. The sun is shining of its own light, and then it makes these other things shine. So the same way Purusha brought its power into the universe to coagulate all these fundamental, non-associated, non-combined elements of the universe together into shapes that would make sense and could be usable by consciousness. In the same way, the Supreme Person is situated within his own power, independent of all things, but lends his power to all things. Thus, he is both within and beyond everything. So now you can make sense of the concept. What is it? George Harrison or somebody had a song called Within You and Without You. It's paraphrasing this Vedic concept in the Purusha Sukta, that the Supreme is within everything, but also outside of everything. 10 inches past. You get it now? It's just like the electricity is all in that light, but it doesn't mean that that light alone comprises all of the electricity. Now Narada is very interested. He says, well, I really want to know how the Supreme Person exists beyond this world. Please explain this to me. Like to understand oxygen in my blood, it's really helpful if I understand oxygen in its own environment, in the air. To understand the sunlight, I can look at the moon, I can look at the sunlight on the ground, but it's really helpful to look directly at the sun. So to understand God, I can look at all the forms that are created in the universe, but it would be really great if I could understand how God exists in God's own arena. So please explain this, he's saying. So Brahma smiles now, and he's delighted with his son's spontaneous spiritual inspiration. He says, my dear boy. So you can see he's really happy because now he calls him my dear boy. The Supreme Person beyond this world is the perfection of fearless nectar. Now that is a phrase. Is that not a phrase? The perfection of fearless nectar. Bardo wants to know if the universe or the Supreme needs him, a frail living creature, to suck its oxygen so it can experience what breathing and being full of energy. No, it can suck oxygen by itself. It doesn't need you to do that. What it needs you for is because you have beauty, and it wants to experience your beauty. And there's another thing that it needs you for. There are two things that it needs you for. It needs you because its own beauty is invested in you and it wants to experience that. And it needs you because its own consciousness is invested in you, or is you, and it wants to be experienced by you. He doesn't need you to suck oxygen for him. He can suck it himself. But he wants to see you fully, nakedly, truly, really, who you really are, and what you really do, and how you really express yourself. Because you're one unique ray from him. So he wants to see that beauty manifested through you. And he also wants to be seen because he's beautiful. So he wants you to see him. That's what he needs you for. Doesn't need you to drink a coffee for him. So the Supreme Person beyond this world is the perfection of fearless nectar, far exceeding any mortal happiness you could possibly imagine. So this person is a condensation of joy. That's how Brahma is describing Bhagavan, the true Purusha beyond the universe. It's not a condensation of earth, water, space, and so forth. He's a condensation of joy, of nectar, which is fearless and exceeds any mortal happiness by far. that you could even imagine. There's no limit to his excellence, but try to understand that the universe we dwell in reflects merely 1/4 of it. So here you get introduced to the Vedic concept of a Jacopat 1/4. That the manifest external world that you can experience right now is 1/4 of, basically, is 1/4 of infinity. So it's just a way to guess. It's not an actual measurement, but it's 1/4 of the amount of color and taste and form, etc., and softness and hardness and fluffiness and slickness that's in Bhagavan. There's no limit to his excellence, but try to understand that the universe we dwell in reflects merely 1/4 of it. Reflects 1/4 of it. His true abode is beyond even what is beyond the three worlds. So you got Bur, Bhuva, Swa. Remember we talked about 14 planes yesterday? And beyond those 3 planes, you got Mahar, Jana, Tapas, and Satya. Now Brahma is saying, guess what? Beyond Satya, which is where he's talking to Narada right now, beyond Satyaloka, that's where the Purusha's Loka is. His true abode is beyond what is even beyond the 3 worlds. It is a place of nectar, security, and fearlessness. So Narada says his natural abode is beyond the world that is itself beyond this one. What is that world beyond this one? So this is the way that Narada interpreted it, and Brahma probably meant it. Not even what I just said, like Purvaswa, and then those 4 realms above that. What Narada is saying, Brahma's going to explain something slightly different. Let's see what he says. The world beyond ours represents 3/4 of the Supreme Person. It is the abode of those who are not forced into rebirth. Our 3 worlds, on the other hand, are for those subject to rebirth because they have a selfish bent, being without very strong convictions towards that Supreme Person. So this is really important. But he's saying now there's a different kind of 3 worlds. He's saying there's the 1/4 world, which is for the people that have no strong convictions towards Bhagavan. And therefore they wander around, trying to find who they are, what they are connected to. So they rebirth. Then there's a world beyond that, which is the 3/4 world for people who have strong convictions to Bhagavan, and therefore they manifest directly in relation to him, and they don't wander around. They take permanent form. And then there's a world beyond that, which is Bhagavan himself. Nay, isn't it, Bardo? Let's see what this footnote is. It's probably a Purusha Sukta line. Brahma parallels many important Purusha Sukta lines. First, the line, you want to hear these? Let me make it a little bit bigger. Oh yeah, now Brahma. Now this stuff that you're hearing in Srimad Bhagavatam is the stuff that you would hear if you studied the Rig Veda when you get to the 10th mandal and you study Purusha Sukta. So here's the Sanskrit from Rig Veda. Utamritat vasyashano yad anenadi rohati. Rohini, right? He enjoys the greatest nectar, far surpassing mundane pleasures. That's what it says in Purusha Sukta. That's exactly what Brahma just said, right? And Purusha Sukta also says, Itevan asya mahimato jayangscha Purusha. The greatness of the original person is extreme. So that's what he's saying too. You can't really describe this person in his own being, but we can try to point you in the right direction. Then the line, Padosya Vishvabhutani Tripadasya Divi. All living entities exist within this 1/4. So in the Purusha Sukta, it talks about this Tripada and Ekpada. 3/4 and 1/4. Those in the 3/4 are divine and extremely joyful and eternally joyful. So that's what Brahma was talking about too. Finally, the line Tripad Udhait Purusha Pado Seha Bhavat Puna. The 3/4 is above and beyond the 1/4, which is repeatedly manifest and unmanifest. So Brahma has explained the Purusha Sukta in a very easy to understand way. That's what the Puranas are for. That's what the Puranas do. They explain the Vedas in a much more comprehensible way. Now, Narada was sympathetic to the souls who enter rebirth in the selfish world. He asked what happens to them. So he's got this structure where you've got Bhagavan and then the world of beings that are in contact with him, and then the world of beings who aren't. He says, well, what goes on with those guys that are in the world of beings that aren't? I mean, that is him also, right? He's in that realm. He's a little bit different than them, but he asks about them. He says, Brahma answers, they roam. That's what they do. We roam far and wide within these worlds because we don't really know who and what we are and what the whole point is. So we're roaming around looking for that. They roam far and wide within these three worlds. When they are inspired by knowledge, they move towards emancipation. When they are inspired by ignorance, they move hungrily towards accumulation. So when inspired by knowledge, the living entities in this world tend to move towards reducing their involvement, their pursuit of external things. That's emancipation, getting free from things. And when they're inspired by ignorance, they move towards, they think they need the external things a lot, and they try to acquire more and more of them. So the entities in this world that has just been evolved, they have two natures. Sometimes they get influenced by knowledge, sometimes they get influenced by ignorance. When they're influenced by ignorance, they think that they need the stuff in this world a lot, so they pursue it. They try to accumulate it. When they're influenced by knowledge, they realize they don't really need this stuff in this world very much at all, so they reduce it. And now Brahma says, in truth, the Supreme Person is a shelter for both of them. John wants to know how you stop roaming. You have to develop strong convictions towards the Supreme Person. Narada wanted to know how the Supreme Person was a shelter for those seeking to accumulate gratification. So Brahma says, Supreme Person is the shelter, the helper, the ultimate foundation and aim for both of the guys who are moving inspired by knowledge towards freedom, and the guys who are moving inspired by ignorance towards greed. So Narada asks, I can get maybe how the Supreme is the ultimate objective for the guys who are moving towards freedom, but how is this Supreme Person the ultimate objective for people moving towards greed? So Brahma explains. How long have we been going here? Oh, we've been going a little long. Let's see where we can make a clean break. Yeah, I think we'll make a clean break at the complex question that's coming up soon, so we'll go up to that. Brahma explained, everything ignorant sense gratifiers want to accumulate and enjoy. Every sense object, sense organ, and sensual vitality hatches from the universal egg, which comes from the Supreme Person. So now you're getting introduced to the concept of the Purusha being something called Hiranyagarbha, which is this divine glowing egg. Because from this Purusha, just like you get things from an egg, from the Purusha you get everything in the universe, all the life forms and all the objects come out from it. So what Brahma is saying is that the people that are trying to get free from material things, they're moving towards the Supreme Person. But the people that are greedy for enjoying material things, they're also moving towards the Supreme Person, because all the things they're greedy for are things that have manifest from him. In the ultimate sense, then, both the wise and the ignorant seek the Supreme. So Narada wonders, maybe they're equal. Maybe it's just as good to be greedy as it is to try to be minimalist. Brahma then explains that no, it's not quite equal. The wise are superior because their outlook is more like the divine outlook of the Supreme Person. So he says the Supreme Person himself is uninterested in the material objects he manifests in this world. Such things are like sunshine, but he himself is the brilliant sun. So it's more wise if you think that there's a lot of pleasure in something that comes from somebody far away, then don't you think that there would be even more pleasure if you could get something even closer to that person or to the person themselves? So that's the idea. The people that are seeking material things are also seeking the Supreme, although they're not aware of it. And the people who are seeking the Supreme are aware that they're seeking the Supreme. So they're both seeking the Supreme, but it's not quite the same. And then certainly the Supreme Person is not involved in either outlook, trying to get free from things or trying to get attached to things, because all these things are manifestations of his sunlight, and he's the sun. All right, hope that makes sense. So we're going to stop there because the next question is complicated. The next section is going to begin Brahma telling Narada about what it was like for him at the beginning of the universe before anybody else was there. Because Narada's question is like this, like the Supreme Person is already everything and already has everything and doesn't want anything, then how do you worship or do anything for this person? Right, let's see what other questions you have here. That's a really wonderful yellow crystal warrior. Barda wants to know why Krishna was born in the 1/4 reality. That's called avatar. I explained this before, so you should probably just review that. Avatars give the people in the 1/4 some chance to stop roaming around and find out what's the real deal. Lakshmi wants to know how you can have a permanent identity in this universe. The most permanent identity that you can have is one that lasts for the duration of the universe, which is 311 trillion solar years according to most calculations. Which doesn't really matter at all, because then you just get born again in the next universe, the next manifestation. So how can we have a permanent identity in this universe? You don't really. Once you get a permanent identity, then you're in the 3/4 universe, not in the 1/4 universe. You move into a different system of reality. In order to have a permanent form, qualities, name, shape, character, you wouldn't exist in this reality. You exist in a different reality. Can we perceive our spiritual progress in the birth charts? Kind of. I know. You could at least see how much. Yeah, you can kind of see that. Why all this hide and seek? Why doesn't God keep everything in his realm? Why coming down, going up? Sorry if this sounds ignorant. It's not hide and seek. It's, imagine if a guy was in love with you and you weren't in love and you didn't like that guy. Wait, let me put it this way. Imagine if a guy was imagine if a guy didn't like you. Would you keep constantly trying to attract that guy? It would be pretty demeaning. I mean, don't you have any self-worth? You can, your whole identity is not wrapped up on that one guy. The guy doesn't like you, let it go. Attract somebody else, find somebody else. Wouldn't that be the way a mature woman would handle it? So that's how God handles it. There's living entities who, by their nature, don't have their consciousness fixated on him. They have their consciousness fixated someplace else. So he lets them do that, and he gives them It gives them a facility to fulfill what they want to do what they want to do. But because what they want to do is not permanently deeply fulfilling, and it's because it's not in harmony with what they truly are, he gives ways that they can, when they want to, correct themselves or change themselves. How can one experience the other three parts of reality? You experience that in relationship with Bhagavan. So you just have to learn who Bhagavan is and get relationship to Bhagavan. Are there embodied beings, those three fourth world dwellers? Yes, you could say so. Although it's, as long as you realize that it's not a body, which is temporary. So the more you learn even what a body is in this universe, the more it will make sense. Okay, guys, I'm going to have to call it quits for now. And then I'll see you after the weekend. Wow, I can't believe it's already Friday. Thank you for joining me. And I'll see you all in 3 days.